The word of wisdom can go deep, right? And it can also go simple.
Mhm.
But for me, the word of wisdom is this discipline of health, nutrition, and the absence of things that aren't good for us.
Welcome, everybody, to our podcast this week. And I am very pleased to have a special guest. We have Cindy Jorgensen, and I'm going to introduce her for just a second. But this is lesson number 34. We're talking about Doctrine and Covenants sections 89 mostly, but also just touching on 90 and 91 and 92. So, Cindy, I am just going to give you just a quick little introduction here. Cindy is a health and wellness expert. She's a speaker and an author of an upcoming book that's focusing on the power that health plays in transforming your life. She's appeared on ABC, CBS, and locally on KSL TV here in Utah. Utilizing science research along with her personal grit, Cindy has overcome depression, obesity, and cancer. She's graciously agreed to share some of her transformative findings that she has amassed over 25 years with thousands of people. Her findings are backed by the research of hundreds of experts, medical doctors, formulators, and scientists across the globe. But some of her discoveries have come from the understanding and adherence to principles of health outlined in the revelation that we now know as the Word of Wisdom. And I just wanted to give you that little introduction, Cindy, because you've had an opportunity. I should say we've had an opportunity to have you speak several times at our conferences that we do. And it's just been really a wonderful blessing to have you come and share some of your insights, especially, it's one thing to have somebody come and talk about something that they've heard about. It's another thing to have somebody come and actually express things that have happened to them personally and that they've had to overcome. And so with that said, those of you who are going to join us, we're going to be going again. We just want to reiterate, I do this at the beginning of every podcast, and that is that we're not trying to supplant your regular, study of the Doctrine and Covenants here with your class, your gospel doctrine class. This is a deep dive into. We usually pick just a few verses or a section or something like that, and then kind of do a little more of a deep dive. And since we're going to be talking about section 89, which is the word of wisdom, revelation, I thought I'd bring somebody who is an expert on health and wellness. And so maybe, Cindy, we can go ahead and we can start off here with on section 89 here. And this was given to the prophet Joseph Smith in Kirtland. Well, I was there early in the year of 1833, on February 27th. And we've talked about some of the things that were going on there historically, but we want to just really kind of jump in and focus here on the word of wisdom itself. And I think there's so much to be understood, and what a blessing it is to have the word of wisdom in our lives. Now, Cindy, I mean, how has the word of wisdom actually affected you in your life, would you say?
Yeah, the word of wisdom can go deep, right? And it can also go simple.
Mhm.
But for me, the word of wisdom is this discipline of health, nutrition, and the absence of things that aren't good for us. And so, I do tell a story. I think a lot of times the word of wisdom is a spiritual law. We think of it a lot as a temporal law, though it is. But Boyd K. Packer, he had said, and then I love to quote him, that actually the word of wisdom includes anything that disrupts our health.
Wow.
So it's a very broad actual interpretation of how we look at this. And what I love about this scripture, I mean, just a little bit about my background. It is alcohol, of course, and drugs, and coffee, tea, those types of things. But I think what Rod and I, what you and I were talking about today is if it is anything that disrupts our health, then we need to look at, sugar and toxicity and sleeping well and the whole gamut of health, right?
Yeah.
And it's broad. I know for me, I love the part that it's talking about conspiring men in this in this particular section. And I think we can see with COVID very clearly how conspiring men actually, there's different theories about how the virus actually came to be. And then we look at just foods that we're eating. and just treatments that we have. So I'm going to show you a really quick picture of myself. It's not a very beautiful one, but
You sure you want to show this?
yes, that's my cancer
Oh,
picture. And there's my inspiration. So we'll kind of jump back and forth. But yeah, I was actually, I'll show that quickly, but I'm a cancer survivor. Okay, now 25 years ago, there was carelessness in the dentist industry. They filled my root canal with mercury. Okay, mercury.
wow.
So we know now how harmful that is. They weren't very thorough about their research. It was a cheap material, and today we fill it with metals and also porcelain. So kind of what happened to me, it dripped down into my neck and into my thyroid, and I ended up with neck and thyroid cancer, and really looking at whether or not I was even going to live. And that overflowed, no thyroid, into depression.
Yeah.
And so there was just this series of health issues that came from men that weren't responsible and didn't research products that they, did.
It also affects your metabolism and all kinds of other things, other systems in your body.
Yes. And they always say with my situation, I should weigh 400 pounds. But we will talk a little bit about nutrition and weight loss and just health that way. But I think, my son watched what I went through, my older boy on the right. And when he was at the Y, he wrote a paper about depression. And he watched his mom suffer 8 series of these as I battled through cancer for almost 8-10 years. He says depression is like being held underwater, never knowing if or when you're ever going to come up.
Wow.
And we look at this, and a lot of us are suffering from depression. It's like 1 in 3 people, and you're looking at, why is that? They're attaching it to foods that we're eating. They're attaching it to medications. They're attaching it to toxicity. And not to get too broad with all of that, but these are the results of living in this toxic land, living right now, when there hasn't been as much attention to the actual results of different types of products and foods. So that's my story there. And so our goal then is to think differently, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, wow. Well, let's jump right into the revelation here. In the very beginning, it says a word of wisdom. I love that. Basically, wisdom is an interesting thing. Those who've been following our research for a while may know that we differentiate between knowledge and wisdom by the kinds of questions that we ask. So there are knowledge questions, which are who, what, where, and why, or not why, but who, what, where, and and when. Okay. And then there's 2 wisdom questions, which are basically how and why, which explain rather than just give data points or information. And so this is to help us explain, because this is wisdom. So this is the why that we should do or not do some of these things that are going to be talked about in this section. It says to be set agreeing not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom. And I think that's a really interesting thing, not by commandment or constraint. This is a health code that is not a commandment, although it is a revelation. But we've had a health code situation where the leadership of the church, actually the administrative leadership of the church, if you will, has put out this information involving masks and the vaccine and so forth for COVID and so forth. But nowhere in there does it say it's a commandment, and there's no constraint. Nobody's going to be denied a temple recommend if they don't mask up or if they don't have the vaccine. But it is a revelation and a word of wisdom. So in this particular case, I think the word of wisdom, the best wisdom that we can have is the wisdom that comes from the Lord himself through our own inspiration and our own revelation, and also that of the prophets and the apostles and the leaders of the church and the scriptures and so forth. It says, showing forth the order and will of God in the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. So the Lord is very interested in our temporal salvation. And I think one of the ways that I love to point this out, one of the ways that he shows that is that every time pretty much in his life and in his ministry, but also when he was with the Nephites, one of the first things he did before he even preached the gospel to them or gave them, additional information, additional understanding, he would heal them. Isn't that interesting? He would always heal them because it's kind of like, I think Brigham Young that said, it makes no sense to preach the gospel to a man who is starving to death. So first take care of their physical needs, and then you can help take care of their temporal needs, and then they can take care of their spiritual needs. And so this is for the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. Verse 3, given for a principle with promise. So this has got a promise associated with it, and we're going to get into the promises here in just a little bit. It says, adapted to the capacity of the weak and the weakest of all saints. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. If we can't at least live the word of wisdom, I think we're pretty pathetic. Okay, and that's one of the kind of the simplest things that we can do. Verse 4. And this is when you were talking about this. Behold, verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, in consequence. So the reason why he's giving this, and he's telling us one of the reasons why he's giving this is in consequence of evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days. Now, you mentioned that, Cindy, just a minute ago, but that is interesting. He's saying that even back at that point in time, there were conspiring men, but he says, but there will be in the future conspiring men in the last days. He says, I have warned you and forewarned you by giving you this word of wisdom by revelation. What do you suppose he's talking about here?
Well, yeah, he is giving us this warning. He's asking us to look for the deceit, and I think it's easy to just go through your life, go get, a root canal or, buy a certain type of food without looking at what's actually in that food. Being haphazard about getting our, going to the doctor every year and making sure our bodies are healthy and getting those tests and other things. And so he wants us to be aware of the deceit. And, the sneak attack, not knowing the enemy is there is our worst offense, right? There's not a lot we can do. But if we're aware and saying, okay, he's going to be coming in, let's educate ourselves, about health, nutrition, about exercise, about the different things that our body and our minds and our spirits that all come together, right, in that holistic thing that comes together, our soul. And I think we just being aware, looking for the enemy, and knowing what he does.
Well, we like to kind of get into some depth of detail here. So, would there be any particular areas or things that you would consider to be evidence of this warning of these conspiring men in the last days? Because I can think of several things, like, for example, taking the natural foods that God created. And by the way, how many natural foods or how many foods has man created? I mean, if you think about it, everything has come from God. Every living thing, because God is the author of all life. So every living thing came from God. It was originally set up in its DNA, in its fulfillment of its purpose to accomplish what God set it forth here on the earth to do. And God doesn't make mistakes. So when he makes an apple tree and creates an apple or an orange or creates, whatever it is, animals and food, of plants and herbs and so forth, that DNA was made, I would assume, perfectly. And then it degresses and devolves from there. Men and women and plants and animals lived for enormous time frames back in the early days of the earth with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and Adam's posterity afterwards. And over the course of time, we've gotten to where we're less and less lived less and less time. And then through medicine and modern science and so forth, we've been able to actually increase that actual life expectancy of man for the last about 100 years or so, 150 years. But But who is this? Maybe you can kind of flesh out a little bit more. What are some of these conspiring men? And maybe I want to bring out a couple more I'd like to talk about. And I want you to kind of think about that for a second. But for example, I think about like the tobacco companies, basically, have had all kinds of slick advertising back when I was a kid, when we were kids. Well, you're a lot younger than I am.
It was all over TV. The Marbella Barrow guy, or
Marlboro,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'd walk a mile for a camel. That was an ad that was over 30 something years ago, and yet I still remember seeing the ad in magazines and so forth. So basically, these were conspiring men. It wasn't until after it was proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that there was all kinds of detrimental health issues that were arising from smoking, from chewing, and so forth, and tobacco products, that we realized that this was actually a concern for the entire society. So that's one. I mean, I could think of a dozen other ones, but I want you to kind of maybe talk to us about some of those other ideas.
Yeah, and so I mean, just we know the pain and sorrow of addiction, right? And we also know studies with alcohol. These kids that get drunk at the end of their high school year. Not that we're promoting that for our children, but 20% of all teens that have one drink become addicted. And so I just feel like there needs to be some education with that, and the effect that those types of things and the parties, the videos, the movies, the YouTube, the Instagram, and the fun that all is being portrayed. And the conspiring men aren't always organized, right? They're the youth. They're selling lies to our children, right? They're selling this certain type of a lifestyle, or you deserve to have this on your senior night, or however that is. So I think we kind of want to, in terms of word of wisdom, that way. But there are some statistics I want to give you too. So I always like to say dead food for the dead body, live food for a live body, right? And we want to look at, let food be your medicine and let medicine be your food. And so, they're kind of messing that up a little bit. But I want to talk just a minute, because you did talk about the apple. And I want us to just talk about a study that was done by UCLA. And it was a study that went from 1952 to 2012. And in 1952, you needed one bowl of spinach to get your daily required nutrients. Today, you need 42 bowls of spinach. So when we look at the foods that we are eating and we think we're getting nutrition, we have to also realize conspiring men, over farming, right? We understand that. The minerals are depleted. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about the 7-year, that I think is a beautiful thing. But the foods are just depleted now from three things. One is the over farming. Another is just the toxicity, right? In the air, the pollution, the land, the soils have pesticides and herbicides, and in our water. Yeah, and chlorine, and how that affects the foods that we are eating. But another study, is an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And we were taught that as children. Well, now, when our grandparents ate an apple, we need to eat like 8 or 10 apples to equal the same nutrition. And so there's this whole, effect right now, and I don't want to get too much on it, but it's very interesting. That's the conspiring men. Those are the types of things that have happened because the soils are depleted. There's over farming, and there's other toxins. But I did love what you talked about. And
well, let me just kind of share that for everybody, because I think if you've been following our podcast for a while, you probably know about the Shemitah cycle, the 7-year cycles that was set up by God to the Hebrews. And essentially, one of the things that we're involved with the Shemitah cycle is that at the end of the 7 years is what they call at the end of that period, and then there's a 7-year. There's another 7 years, so that ends up with the 7 times 7, which is 49. Then you end up with the 50th year is a jubilee year. But every 7 years, basically, everything was supposed to be kind of reset back to zero. It's like the Great Reset, except for God. God's doing it anyway. So for example, if I owed someone money, or somebody owed me money, those debts would just be forgiven, erased, and everybody starts over fresh again every 7 years. But one of the parts of that was that God wanted to have the land be able to have its Sabbath. And so every 7 years, the Jews were told that they were supposed to keep a little bit out of each year extra. And so that by the seventh year, you could let the land lay fallow and not plant, not harvest. Whatever came up naturally by itself could be harvested, basically. But everything else, you couldn't really, actively, culture, do agriculture on the land. And so the land would receive its rest every 7 years. It's Sabbath. And after a while, when the Jews would live that, they would actually do really well. And then when they began to say, well, you know what, it's just kind of a sacrifice to have to give up, that 1/7 of our food supply every 7 years. So when they would start farming through the end of that Shemitah year, it's funny because the land didn't produce as much food. So they ended up still with less overall than they did before. So that's a little bit of information about the Shemitah cycle and Leah. But I want to just hang on to this conspiring men thing for a second, because I see this going on in so many places. That when I was growing up, I grew up on a dairy farm, and it wasn't very long before there were conspiring men that basically said, well, if you're going to sell milk to the cheese factories up in Logan, basically, the milk has to be handled in certain ways, and basically drove, they said you have to have these special milkers, and it has to go directly into a holding tank and so forth and so on. So those farmers who were out there actually milking cows by hand, or had these old, what they call surge milking machines and so forth, they would, unless they were going to, pony up a whole bunch of money, it put them out of business. We had a small operation. I think at our heyday, I think we had like 10 or 12 cows. So it wasn't a big milking operation, but it still takes, every day and every night you have to milk them. And so you're pretty much tied to the farm when you're doing that. But then we started finding out that they would add the milk would go through all these processes, pasteurization and homogenization and so forth, which the pasteurization is basically heating the milk so that all the enzymes and so forth basically get pretty much killed. Okay, the homogenization is where you take a lot of cow's milk and you mix it all together, so it kind of keeps everything kind of more consistent. But that means that there are cows that maybe had mastitis or other issues that their milk could be added into the mix and be essentially diluted to the point where it doesn't make too much of a difference, but you have really nasty milk in with all the other milk. And I still drink a lot of milk, so I have nothing against the dairy industry here. I'm just saying that there were people that a lot of this was done to try to make the milk more, less issues with contaminants and other issues in there, and also to help preserve it so it would last longer. But the overall effect is that we were changing, the natural milk. And then I'll just tell you one other just interesting little story. And basically, the young man in our high school that was worked on a big dairy farm, and my dad, and we just fed our cows, grass, hay, and grain. And some of these big dairies that were doing this stuff, they needed to get more and more milk out of the cows, so they would actually add hormones into things. And the way to get the cows more hormones was to actually spray the hormones onto the grains that the cows would eat. Well, this young man didn't know this, and so he had a little bit of a liking to the grain. So he would pick little bits of grain out while he's milking the cows, and he would pop it in and just eat this grain because, hey, it's just grain, right? Well, we were playing football, and we started noticing some physiological changes in this young man. He was turning into a girl on the top, and basically, we were like, he was kind of getting razzed a little bit because he was really developing breasts, and he was like, "What the heck is going on?" He's like, "I don't know what's going on. It's just so weird." And his voice started changing. And so I guess his parents took him to the doctors, and they said, "Well, man, your progesterone and what's the other one? Estrogen levels are just off the charts. Why is that going on?" And they traced it back to him just munching on that grain in the morning and at night when he'd be feeding the cows. And when he stopped doing it, everything kind of went back to normal. But in order to make the cows give more milk, they would give them these hormones to force more milk production. And then again, that's not natural either. So whenever we change God's natural foods, and that also includes then genetically modified foods. Genetic modification was originally done because there were so many different creatures like crickets and worms and moths and so forth that would lay eggs and larvae on all these different foods, and trying to create more food per acre meant that we needed to get rid of all the pests that would actually eat the food. So we'd put pesticides on the foods to try to keep them from eating all the fruits of the crops up. Well, that again adds that these pesticides are designed to kill things, and it does. It kills these things. And then they said, well, maybe rather than trying to kill off all the grasshoppers and the ants and other things that would crawl on these things, maybe if we change the food so it's not really something that these grasshoppers and stuff want to eat, if we change the food genetically so that they're not appetizing to these creatures, then they'll stop eating all the fruit of these crops. And so a lot of genetically modified foods had to do with that, or to get bigger ears of corn or larger tomatoes, or to make things look more pretty in the stores so they can sell for a higher price. And a lot of that genetic modification changed the original actually DNA structure of many of these foods. So there's foods. I think there's been originally pharmaceutical companies were set up primarily because of the problems that we had with polio and other diseases and things. And those diseases were ravaging the country, and the primary purpose was to actually help mankind. But I think many of these pharmaceutical companies have actually kind of moved from just wanting to serve mankind and to try to make life better to having to deal with their board and their investors and try to just make more and more money, no matter what the cost, no matter what the physical costs are. And that brings me to one other thing. And there's so many, I think, ideas of conspiring men that are affecting us, because of greed, and because of just wanting to be able to increase production and things like that. They've wanted to change what God made. God made our bodies too. And so God made our bodies to be able to handle a lot of these toxins and a lot of these issues, a lot of these problems, as if we don't overload the body. But the body is like it's been referred to as being a temple, right, Cindy? So I think I already mentioned that, but our bodies are a temple. And how do you treat a temple? Well, you treat it with respect. You treat it with care. You put the best materials. When the church builds a temple, it uses the best materials it can get its hands on, right? The best the structure and the finishes and everything are all just as good as they can get. Do we treat our bodies in the same way? Do we put garbage into our bodies and then hope that it's going to stay healthy? Do we feed our bodies healthy foods? Do we respect our bodies? Do we not desecrate it? Do we put our own artwork on God's handiwork, through tattooing and all kinds of stuff that goes on? So that is, I think, another little interesting aspect of it. Okay, I'm a little bit.
Back up a little bit, because I do want to talk about the milk and the way that it's been heated. A large percent of because I actually use a whey protein that's cold press processed that maintains all the enzymes. I mean, the enzymes are needed in order to fight off the toxins, right? And enzymes in milk itself actually break apart toxins. But if they're heated, they lose that property. And so what I want, God gave us the land, right, and the problems in this era. He's giving us some solutions, and I know we'll get to that as well. But I did want to talk about allergic reactions with milk are from the processes that you just spoke about. Okay,
Yeah.
give children milk that hasn't been processed, or that has been cold press processed for whey protein, they won't have the allergic reactions.
Can I just tell you a quick story about that? So my whole family, we had all these cows, right? And so we also had a well on our property, but the well produced water that was very, shall I say, less than drinkable. I mean, it had a lot of iron in it, and it just tasted horrible. It actually had a weird smell when it come out. So we had all these different filters and stuff to try to do it, but we as kids, we just drink milk instead of water. So that was our primary liquid. We would go through 15 gallons of milk in a week with myself and my 4 siblings and my parents. And not one of us had milk allergies at first. And then after because of regulation and so forth, it just got to the point where it was costing us more money than we were actually getting from the milk itself. So we finally kind of just ended the whole dairy thing. But then most of my kids have milk allergies, but I can still drink milk like crazy, and it doesn't bother me at all. Even the store-bought milk. But whenever I get an opportunity to get some whole raw milk, man, it just is so good. But actually, because of Conspiring Men, you can't even get. You can almost not even get. In fact, they've made it illegal for many smaller farmers. They have just just a couple of cows or some goats or whatever. They can't even legally sell their milk. They can be prosecuted for selling their milk. So they have to say, you can make a donation and take some milk if you would like to out of our coolers. But this is, I believe, again, part of the Conspiring Men. And they do it always in the name of safety and security. Isn't that interesting?
So deceptive. That's why God is saying, I give you this warning, and we need that personal revelation now, always that the prophet's talking about. I do want to throw out high fructose corn syrup.
Oh, yeah.
When that went through the FDA, there was a medical doctor in that courtroom that said this will change the health of all people around the world, and the skyrocketing of diabetes since the high fructose corn syrup. Read your label. I mean, it's in ketchup. It's in so many different products, right?
Yeah.
But just little small things, and it was all done for money, right? It was all done for money. It was a cheaper way to do things, and so I always like to bring that up because if we look at diabetes, and I just have a little quote I want to say, it's just unsustainable. I mean, in the past, it was very few people that have diabetes. They're projecting in 10 years that 1 in 3 babies will have type 1 diabetes. And so, we probably have less than that. Autism. I just want to throw out some facts here. In 1990, 1 in 10,000 children were born with autism. Now it's 1 in 50 boys, and in 10 years, it's projected to be 1 in 20. Breast cancer. In 1990, 1 woman out of 15 had breast cancer. Now it is 1 in 8. And in 10 years, it's projected to be 1 in 3 women that will lose a breast to breast cancer. So we're seeing the toxicity in the land. We're going into what are the foods that they're eating or not? What nutrients do they have and don't have? And we haven't been protected by the FDA, right? We know what's going on there, right? The Conspiring Men helping each other increase their cash flow. So those are just some numbers that I wanted to just throw out about the actual reality of the Conspiring Men that were just true facts.
Wow. Yeah, and there's so much more we could talk about with that. But let's go to verse 5. Inasmuch as any man drinketh wine or strong drink among you, behold, this is not good, neither meat in the sight of your Father, only assembling yourselves together to offer up your sacraments before him. So wine and strong drink. Okay, and behold, this, and then he kind of defines what kind of wine can be used in the sacraments. He says, behold, this wine should be pure wine of the grape of the vine of your own make. So not alcoholic wine that has fermented, but actually grape juice is the way I understand that to be. Now, back in Christ's day, the wine that they had, and also in the Book of Mormon times, they needed to have that wine ferment because it needed to be able to be preserved. So if you don't want it to go rancid or go rotten, you basically have to let it go into the fermentation stage, which is actually part of the breakdown of the wine itself too. But basically, they're talking about grape juice here, as I understand that. Is that what you understand too, Cindy? Okay. Verse 7 again, strong drinks are not for the belly, but for the washing of your bodies. I think strong drinks would probably include alcoholic, things that are of alcoholic things. I think anything that causes your body to have a reaction that it feels like it is, it's habit forming. Personally, and my personal feeling is that any habit forming foods or drugs or any other kind of thing like that causes you to have a physical desire or physical need for that product in order for you to be healthy or happy or feel good or whatever, is probably not good. So, I mean, whether it's heroin or cocaine or marijuana smoking, or whether it's, caffeinated things, sugar, coffee, there's a lot of things that are addictive, and some are less and more addictive than others. But still, I think if it's an addictive thing, if you have a hard time not having it, then it's probably addictive and maybe not that good for your body.
Well, and I love what you're talking about nutrition and sugar, because there's called the bliss point, and there's a lot of research on hitting that bliss point where it's an addictive place for potato chips, different types of foods. There's millions and millions of dollars on research. Where is that bliss point where it's got enough salt and enough sugar to keep the individual addicted actually to the product?
that might be one of my addictions, because I love Lay's potato chips. They said the advertising used to say no one can eat just one. Well, that's really true for me. I can't stop. But some chips and a lot of different foods have what they call MSG, monosodium glutamate. And what does that do? Why do they put monosodium glutamate or MSG in foods? And the answer to that has to do with your taste buds, because your taste buds only will have a certain reaction to different chemicals as you eat, and it fires off those taste buds. But when you have bland food, it doesn't fire off a lot of taste buds, so you don't get a lot of pleasure from eating that food. But one way you can take that food and make it more pleasurable is if you have a chemical that actually causes the taste buds to fire off, even though that taste chemical is not even there. They replicate the chemical. It causes the tongue and the taste buds to fire. And so it seems like there's so much more flavor in that particular food, but all it's really doing is just firing off. It's an excitotoxin is what it is, and it excites those receptors in your tongue. Problem is when you eat it, it goes then into your gut, and MSG is one of those kind of drugs that also will pass the blood-brain barrier, and so it gets into your brain, and those excitotoxins are now in your brain, causing overexcitement of your brain cells. It can happen with that. Some of the studies that I've seen, talking about that. So anyway, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
We can when we're on sugar, and that is to talk just a moment about obesity. I think we really need to look at the facts with that. Over 30% of America is obese, and probably 70% is overweight. And so I think it's a very sensitive topic. I know some people have certain tendencies, family, genetics.
Yeah.
But then there's other things, and I just want to briefly talk about that. And I do want to explain something. I brought my little ball, but kind of what happens with a toxin, okay, is when we have these toxins, our bodies create fat, and this big ball of fat around the toxin. Okay, now we'll talk about some solutions in a little bit, but we have high nutrient cleansing, and it will suck out the actual toxin in the cell. Okay, so there are some solutions, but I do think we need to, let me show you a slide on this real quickly. Let me do this real fast, see if it'll let me share screen here.
While you find that, I will just talk about real quickly. And again, tobacco, this is verse 8, is not for the body, neither for the belly, and is not good for man. And this is why I call this conspiring men, because it's not good for the the body or the belly, and it's not good for us. But yet it was emphasized as you couldn't be really cool unless you had a cigarette in your hand and were blowing smoke out of your nostrils. So
And they think vaping is so safe, and I don't know. I mean, it's
it's interesting though that God has always, and we talked about this a few weeks ago on a podcast, that God always has a backup plan for everything, whether it's the 116 pages or when we make mistakes in our lives. But also, tobacco isn't good for man, but it says it's an herb for bruises and all sick cattle, to be used with judgment and skill. So he didn't say don't use tobacco bad, very bad plant. I made a very bad plant. Actually, it has good uses, but just not to eat and not to smoke. And that's the same for a lot of different plants, like even marijuana, for example, can be abused and used to do psychotropic events in your brain. But it also is a very powerful herb and can be used for a lot of other good things too, in cannabis and so forth. So there we go. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, I just want to show this slide a little bit, because I do want to be sensitive about obesity, but we know what it does to our bodies. And when you see this, you see this little squiggly mark at the top, and this is Newsweek. They did a study, and they showed that squiggly mark is the toxins. So that would be toxins in the air, the water, and your food. And your body naturally just creates a bubble of fat, like I just showed you, to protect itself from the toxin. Our livers are going crazy, right? And our liver metabolizes fat and it gets rid of toxins, because fat is a toxin. And because of the overabundance of toxins, we are knowing that this is taxing the liver and creating obesity in children, in adults, in so many ways. And so it's not always this overeating, lack of discipline. It's also your body's reaction to the conspiring toxins that are in the land. And we do have some solutions of when people do diet, they still have the toxins. And when they do cleanses, natural herbal, high nutrient dense cleanses, they're able to get rid of these toxins and get rid of the fat, which is very exciting. And this shows just a blood before and blood after an 11-day nutritional cleanse and shake routine. So, it's pretty interesting to see how our body responds to high density nutrition. And so this is a solution to some of it, is discovering these different types of cleansing. And cleansing doesn't always have to be without food, but it does need to be with nutrition. And so that's that. So yeah.
Nice. Okay.
One other slide too I want to show, and I don't want to get on my bandwagon on the weight loss, but
Well, can I ask you how many? Do you tell people how much weight did you lose?
I lost 43 pounds. In fact, let me show you a picture really quickly here. Yeah, I wanted my life back, and it frightened me, and I was in nutrition. It was very hard for me because I didn't have a thyroid, and I was just battling everything. And so this picture on the left is me. And I'm ugly and sad and
That's
angry.
you. Wow.
Yeah, that is me. And so I just started exercising, and I'd lose 17 pounds and I'd feel so good. And then I'd think, okay, I'm going to go for another 10, and I'd lose another 10 and I'd feel so good. And I could exercise and move around and even water ski. And so I just went down about 43 pounds. And and it changed my life. It changed my spirit, truly, my soul, because I began to let go of sugar, let go of white flour. And not that any of that is against the word of wisdom, but it is against our health code. If we want optimum health, we just want to at least manage it, So yeah, so that's my story there.
Wow, that is quite a story. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I have been yeah, I started to gain a little bit of weight. I think I got my COVID 20 pounds, what they call it, the COVID 20 or whatever, you know. And but since the first of the year, I think I've lost about almost 30 pounds myself. So I've actually lost a bunch of weight. And it does. It makes you feel better. You have more energy. You feel more. You can sleep better at night. It's really pretty good. All right, let's see. We probably move on here to verse 10. And again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God has ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. Wholesome herbs. And he really doesn't give us any real except fors. There's no really exceptions on the herbs. Pretty much the herbs are pretty much, it says, every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof. I love the fall of the year because of that.
Those peaches, yeah, those Brigham City peaches.
Yeah, the peaches, the apricots, the grapes and everything. I mean, I love this time of the year because everything is just fresh and you can just pull it right off. It still amazes me to walk up to like a peach tree and here's this beautiful fruit just sitting there and and all you got to do is just pick it and just eat it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But even,
well, and I think what to look at too is it includes your number one herb is our minerals. So minerals are the spark plugs of life. So you got borium, gold, selenium, there's 70 right on the periodic table. And so I think that is gives the body's ability to actually absorb the nutrients that it does eat. And so I think that is, part of a way to maximize your nutrition is actually looking at, minerals and how those can absorb. And of course I have the suite that I use, but it's got 90 different nutrients and I have, 70 different minerals. So you do want to look at that. And like you said, I think God gave us a plan on the other side, and he did give us the ability to concentrate nutrients. And that's a new science. And we have, a video at the end, just a short clip about that. But he is giving us solutions for the word of wisdom situation as we keep our eyes open of the warnings and also keep our eyes open of the solutions.
So how do you get enough of the minerals and so forth? Because because of the food that we're getting, even if you eat a nice peach or an apple or whatever, or bananas or whatever you have, most of those have had sprays put on them to keep the critters off of them, keep the flies and so forth from eating them, the worms and things. And so you have to wash that stuff off. But then also a lot of these things get processed, and if you eat a peach pie, I mean, the peaches that are in there have gone through all kinds of different processes as well. And usually it involves preservatives so that they will last longer, which is good because the fruit doesn't, rot as fast. But it also affects, the nutrients in it and so forth. How do you get enough vitamins and minerals? I mean, I take a handful of supplements every morning. I don't have any prescriptions, but I have a bunch of supplements that I take because I feel like that my body is not getting enough nutrients, even though I eat, regular amounts of food. So what do you do?
So I actually, and I guess give my website at the end or
Sure.
some type of connection that way. But yeah, I use liquid nutrition as well. You have to get dense, concentrated nutrition. So I have over 70 minerals I take in the sweets. I cleanse with them. It's the heart of the aloe vera that I use, and then it's actually in a powder or a liquid form, and I'm drinking that sometimes every night, or I'll do a 2-day or a 1-day semi-fast where I'm eating salads with the cleansing and high grade whey protein shakes that are cold press processed, that have the proteins that are branched chain amino acids, types of protein. And I have a whole protocol. That's why I was on television, actually talking a little bit about that system and how it works. So you want the dense, concentrated nutrition is going to suck out the toxins like we showed and create this vibrancy and energy that you've never experienced. In fact, I've had a lot of my clients and patients say that they feel like they've like a fast. It's such a spiritual experience for them to actually have this higher nutrition in their body. And we always teach that, feed yourself to health. People are on all these different kinds of diets, and they're taking out carbs, and they're taking out fat, and they're taking out healthy proteins, and they're just in these crazy different
bad diets.
bad diets. Yeah. And no one knows what to do, right? No one knows exactly what to do. And so that's kind of one thing that I focus on with my clients, is focusing in on the high dense nutrition, where the intensity of the nutrition is your nutrition, right? And food is like your supplement. And we always laugh about that, because exactly for all the reasons that you've spoken about, there's just so little nutrition. I mean, one orange, now you need 12. I mean, it's just, and even that, like you said, have the pesticides and the herbicides that your body's fighting. And so it creates that bubble of fat, right? To protect itself, and your liver's going
We're
crazy.
in trouble.
Yeah. And so anyway, high dense nutrition is kind of what we use. And so,
yeah. Well, and I look at it as also the standpoint of your health is actually a product of many different things. Nutrition is obviously it's kind of like the foundation of everything else. But there's things like your mental health, that affects your overall health. Things like your sleep habits and so forth. You get enough sleep. Okay, and that's one that I am personally very guilty of, because I mean there was a few years there when we first started doing the research on the Book of Mormon, where I was down to averaging about 3, maybe 4 hours of sleep a night. I was going to bed at 2 or 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and getting up at 6:30 with scriptures with my family. And I could do that for a few years, but after a while, it started to. I'm not going to be able to sustain this level forever, and I'm really abusing the body. And I've been blessed with a pretty healthy, body. So I've been really grateful for that. And that brings us to one other little thing here in verse 11 here. Every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, and all these to be used with prudence, and I love this, thanksgiving. And then we haven't talked about meat yet, so we want to do that real quick here. That's yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they're to be used sparingly. And this is one of the things I love about in studying the Native Americans and so forth, is their dependence. Some tribes were quite dependent upon meat, basically the buffalo, and so forth. But pretty much all the Native American tribes would have deer or antelope or moose or elk or whatever they could get, whatever they could get. But one of the things I love about the Native American culture is their idea of that after they would have killed something, they basically give thanks to that animal. They thank that animal for giving its life so that we could have life. And I think we as a culture, I would say probably half of our kids have never even seen a chicken killed, much less cows and sheep and ducks and chickens and all these other kinds of things, and all these things that we eat and we kill it. But how many times do we, other than just say a quick blessing on the food, do we actually give thanks? Unless you've been to a third world country and you've actually seen people who are literally starving, it's pretty hard to imagine here in America what it's like to go without food for several days. I one time did a week-long fast, and I tell you what, it was pretty hard. The first 2 or 3 days was the worst, and after that, it was actually relatively easy, because my body went into what they call it, ketosis or whatever. Yeah, and anyways, and so I was actually just using my own fat, but the point basically here is, what do you think about this idea of giving thanks for the food that we have, and then also, I wanted to get your idea about intermittent fasting.
absolutely, yeah. So that's my main thing I do is the intermittent fasting. So first of all, on the meat, I love that God is letting us eat our meat. I love my prime rib, and I love my ribeye steak. But he says to use it sparingly, right? He says, like, I usually won't eat more than 4 ounces of meat. That's kind of what I do. But I eat, veggies and all kinds of other things, but I get to enjoy it. And he is allowing it, he wants us to enjoy what he's created for our benefit. And so I like that. And it's all just about it's all just about moderation in all things, right? So that is my piece on that. And I'm not against if people want to be a vegan or paleo that just eats fish. You know, Jesus ate fish. I mean, we were talking about that. But I don't want people to feel like they're a sinner if they're having some steak, right? And some chicken and enjoying these gifts that God gave us. Because I am one that likes a good steak. So I'm here to kind of put that plug in. Now, intermittent fasting, the protocol that I actually do use with my clients is just that. So what happens when you start, your body goes into this natural cleansing and detoxification when it starts to do intermittent fasting. Now, what you need to be aware of, the most effective way to do intermittent fasting is what I spoke about earlier, is to be taking a flood of nutrients and minerals while you're doing that. If you're not, your body will go into a catabolic state where it start eating its muscles. You know, your muscle, you've heard of that, right? How your body starts to eat your muscle if you fast too long. But if you have the high dense nutrients in your body while you're doing the intermittent fasting, then your body is going to be fed. Okay. And so it will be fed, and so that it can truly then have the energy to get rid of the toxins and the overload. So I think you just really got to be careful with that. And we recommend no more than 2 days of the intermittent fasting without food. So if you just want to do, high whey protein shakes that we give people, so they do have some protein that's easily digestible, because you're wanting to give your body a rest.
Right.
Okay. And then the second goal of that is you want to feed it. And that's where most people miss the boat, is they don't do the nutritional cleansing. And it is an oxymoron, right? You're cleansing, but you're feeding your body. And so that's the important thing. And I know some people like to do this 30-day no food thing. I don't recommend that. Yeah. For the most part, we're not designed for that, but we do go up to like 48 hours but with the nutrients with it. So
yeah, see, that's what I like to do. That I actually do that quite often, probably at least maybe once or twice a week. I'll usually, I'll skip breakfast and lunch and have dinner, or I'll have. I'm kind of a dinner guy, so it seems like mornings and afternoons are just so hectic. I usually don't have time to eat anyway, and so I'm not really fasting. Many times I should be fasting more with a purpose, but I do skip a lot of meals that way. And and actually I think I feel actually better, but I think overdoing it can be hard on for some people. If you've tried to fast for 30 days, I mean, your body's going to shut down certain organs and you may have a hard time coming out of it. But anyway, so we need to finish up here. We've got you have a video.
Yeah, a couple of things that happen with weight loss. I just want to give some facts. So when we start to get ourselves in check with our health, 57% of migraines are resolved. Depression's resolved 55%. GERD drops 72 to 98%. Urinary tract infections drop 44 to 84%. I mean, gout 77% is resolved when we're in our time, in our health, in our weight, and also type 2 diabetes is 83% resolved. So I really want to kind of put a plug in for in the weight loss there. And then there was one other thing I did want to talk briefly about. And I know this is really a big hit right now in the media, and it's all about telomeres. And you spoke a lot about DNA and the DNA damage that is done. And I want to show you kind of what this is. A chromosome, and at the tips of the chromosome are called telomeres. And telomerase is an enzyme that keeps it intact like this. As we age and as we gain weight and as we get unhealthy, it starts to fray. And when it frays, it actually is like the train track, and it just breaks open, and it's no longer able to protect the DNA in our chromosomes. So we will do a link with that video that kind of explains that. We can do that real quickly. We did talk about that. That's like a minute video I do want to show.
Hang on just one second. While you bring that up or get that up, and let me just finish up with a couple other things here. So it's again talking about the okay. We're talking about meat. It should be used only in times of winter or of cold or of famine. I think that's if you're eating meat a lot. That's when if you're going to eat meat, quite often, then you probably ought to do that in the winter, cold, or famine. That's what it says. Verse 14, all grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts to be the staff of life. So grain we were meant to be able to process grains and so forth. Not only for man, but for the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven and the wild animals that run and creep on the earth. And these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. I think he's talking about the wild animals that run and creep and so forth. Verse 16, all grain is good for the food of man, and also the fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. So he's telling us, things like potatoes and beets and carrots and things like that are in the ground, as well as those that are above the ground, things like celery and parsley and broccoli and all these other kind of things that we can get. Those are all good for food of man. Nevertheless, wheat for man, corn for the ox. See, notice that corn's not for man. Really, corn has sugars that are very hard to digest. And that's another thing I was going to mention, and that is when you eat a big steak, it takes almost as much energy from your body to break down the steak as what the steak will actually provide. So it's kind of a zero-sum food. Whereas these other, especially raw vegetables, where we need to get enough fiber. We haven't talked about fiber or anything, but that's another important part of it. And oats for the horse, rye for the fowls, and for swine and all beasts of the field, and barley for all useful animals, and for mild drinks, and also other grain. And this is at the beginning, it said there was a promise involved with this. This is where the promise happens, is here in verse 18, 19, 20, and 21. It says in verse 18, and all saints remember to keep and do these sayings, walking in obedience to these commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow to their bones. I mean, how important is that? Health in the navel and marrow in the bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures. This is an interesting aspect of it, because if you remain healthy, basically, if you follow this word of wisdom, he's saying you're going to gain knowledge. You're going to get smarter. That's an interesting side blessing or side benefit to this. And then he says, and you shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. In other words, your body will sustain you in the things that you need it to do to accomplish your mission here on this earth. And I, the Lord, give unto you a promise that the destroying angel shall pass by them as the children of Israel and not slay them. Amen. What do you think about that promise, Cindy?
Oh, it's beautiful. It's so far reaching. And I think as we pray and ask Heavenly Father to actually reveal to us the blessings he's giving us for our obedience, I think we'll be amazed at what what just the tender mercies that are coming into our lives. Mm-hmm. Yes. I think that I love the way that God just wants so badly to pour out all he has for us, every good thing. And he asked just a very simple thing, don't drink alcohol, try to be responsible about your meat, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I mean, I eat 5 cups of vegetables a day, I'm really focused on that. And he gives us all of these good things and then these promises. I think this is the beautifulest part, which again, President Nielsen always talks about, this personal revelation. Yeah. And I think our spiritual acuity for personal revelation is heightened as we live this in the highest way that we can manage. Yeah, I just wait to see. I always say my life is an adventure. I can't wait to see what's next from God. Right? I can't wait. And please give me the eyesight to see it. And the grateful heart, to appreciate it. And that whole thing about gratitude, there's so much research on what gratitude does to our physical health and our mental health and our spiritual health, of course. And inside of gratitude, and it has asked us to be grateful inside of the word of wisdom, inside of this gratitude, God can just pour out so many blessings, so much abundance, physical, spiritual, mental. And I just can't wait to see what more he has to offer, as we stay grateful and we stay, connected to each other and connected to truth and try to keep our bodies healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just as the final kind of thing, I want you to play your video, but the final thing, I mean, kind of the elephant in the room is obviously this whole vaccine thing. It's been a big deal for everybody in the last little bit. And just for me personally, you know, one of the things that has made me a little bit leery about the vaccine, basically on the COVID, is the lack of long-term research, and the fact that for the first time we have a vaccine which actually is designed to alter human DNA. I don't know that we know how that is going to turn out. I have the feeling that it's not going to turn out well. Those who've taken the vaccine and so forth, I think that there's also been promises that we've already talked about in previous podcasts that even those who have the power in the priesthood, even if you've taken poison or whatever, you know, it can heal you of that, so you can be healed of the effects of some of these things that might turn out to be longer term effects from this vaccine. But each of us, I believe that that the prophet, in fact, when it came out here about a week or so ago, talking about the vaccines and being safe and effective and so forth, I think that we need to be following the advice that has been really poured out, especially during the administration of President Nelson. He has stressed over and over and over again that we need to use the Spirit and have the spirit of discernment and to ask the Lord for whether or not these things are good. The first statement that the church came out with on the vaccine basically said, you know, that we recommend that members of the church take it to the Lord. If the Lord is telling you to do a certain thing, then, you know, if the Lord's saying, you know, vaccine's fine for you, then that's great for you. If the Lord has been telling you that you probably shouldn't be taking the vaccine, then I think that even this secondary statement by the church doesn't preclude you or make you into a lesser member of the church if you choose not to take the vaccine. It is not a thing that's going to keep you from going to the temple at this point. It is a personal decision, and it should be made between you and the Lord. And I think we can use our prophet and the brethren as examples. You know, they apparently have taken it to the Lord, and they feel good about it. But I know a whole lot of other people who are solid members of the church who don't feel good about it. So let us not attack or belittle or do anything that would cause strife and animosity between ourselves as members of the church. Let's be respectful of those who have had the Lord whisper to them one way or the other. That's kind of my personal thought about it. I am not excited about it. I'm not planning to get it myself personally, but I know a lot of other people who, because of being coerced by their businesses and so forth, that they are literally being forced into it and have to make a decision whether they're going to take the vaccine or have a job, be able to provide for their families, which tells me that there's something nefarious about this whole thing when it's got to the point where they're trying to restrict individual liberty and trying to force a particular vaccine that the pharmaceutical companies are making bazillions of dollars on, because we don't even pay for it. Our government pays for it. And so ultimately we are paying for it, but just not out of our own pockets that we see ourselves. It's coming out of our government. It's literally going to, if this continues on with the booster shots and everything else, it's going to be one of the things that will help to actually destroy our nation, I feel. So that's one of the, that's just a little bit, that's a personal thing about, for me, you can take it with a grain of salt. In fact, if you talk about salt, if you're going to have salt, you should have mineral salt, so you get some minerals from the salt too. All right, Cindy, go ahead. Let's play your video.
Like a minute and a half video and then kind of a summary that's a little bit longer. But I do want to share a little bit about this DNA research that people are so concerned about.
When cells divide, telomeres shorten. And bad things happen when telomeres get short. When a cell divides, the genetic material inside that cell needs to be copied. This is called DNA replication. During this process, enzymes that replicate a strand of DNA are unable to continue replicating all the way to the end, which causes the loss of some DNA. As an analogy, think of DNA as a long row of bricks, and of DNA replication as a bricklayer walking backwards on top of a brick wall, laying a new layer on top of that row. When the end of the wall is reached, the bricklayer finds himself standing on top of the bricks he's supposed to replicate. But since he can't put down a brick where his feet are, he steps back and falls off the wall, leaving the very end of the wall bare. As a result, the new copy of the wall is shorter. Just like this brick wall was copied imperfectly, our DNA is unable to copy itself perfectly. When a strand is replicated, the new strand is shorter than the old strand. Now what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out a way to prevent that shortening and actually re-lengthen telomeres. How can we prevent telomere shortening? Our reproductive cells have no telomere shortening, and this is why our children are born younger than we are, because our reproductive cells have no aging process. So in trying to understand why this is happening in our reproductive cells, we discovered an enzyme called telomerase. Telomerase re-lengthens telomeres. Every time a reproductive cell divides, the telomere still gets a little bit shorter, but then telomerase re-lengthens it. And in our research, we've discovered if we add more telomerase, the telomeres actually get longer and the aging in the cells actually gets reversed. The cells become younger.
So that's just a little bit of information of hope that I want to give to people is God is creating a science and solutions right now for us. And I just have this last little clip, and then I think we'll just wrap up.
I think we're running a little bit long here, so go ahead.
Okay, so we'll finish this up, and then I think we're done. All right. I know it's so fun to talk about this. We just go on and on, but
yeah.
Just a second. Sorry here.
So section 90 is involving the about a little bit more about the first presidency. It has this verse in verse 11. It says, "It shall come to pass that in that day that every man shall hear the fullness of the gospel in his own tongue and his own language, through those who are ordained unto this power." And I was going to talk a little bit about that, but I think we're just going to need to keep it short here. So I'll just say that that has been amazingly fulfilled, the gospel in their own language, whether it's the translation department of the church and general conference, or the number of languages the Book of Mormon has been translated into, or the number of languages that the church is involved with and around the world. It's just really amazing to see how that has come from 1833 till now. Section 91 has to do with the Apocrypha, the apocryphal writings of the Old Testament. Wish we had more time to talk about that, but there's a lot of different books. There's a lot of truths in the Apocrypha, but it has to be understood if it's that you have to use the Spirit to understand what things have been truth and what things have been changed by the philosophies of men. And section 92 was to Frederick G. Williams, and that is the end of our section. So Cindy, let's go ahead and hear the final thing. Thank you so much for being with us.
I just wanted my family to be healthy.
I just wanted to feel youthful again.
I wanted something that was flexible.
I was looking for more energy to keep up with my children and my grandchildren.
I was trying to build more muscle.
I just wanted to feel better.
I wanted something I could recommend to my patients that helps their bodies at a cellular level.
Like most people, you're probably watching this video because you're looking for a different result with your health and well-being, but you're experiencing something totally different. You're about to learn about a proven solution that's helped hundreds and thousands of people. It's endorsed by doctors and addresses health at the cellular level. The solution is letting people take back their health. It's easy, affordable, tastes great, and has lasting results. People are looking for results when it comes to weight loss, but the options are full of empty promises, have conflicting information, and aren't addressing the problem at the cellular level. Not being able to be successful at their goals, they feel guilty and blame themselves. It's important for you to understand that you're not alone. I was there, wanting to get down to the weight that was on my driver's license, stuck in preconceived notions of what to do to lose weight. I would lose the weight, then gain it back again, and even then some. Nothing worked. I was tired of empty promises. No one was talking about the truth. I was actually starving myself at the cellular level. You're probably thinking, how did I do that? I had to think differently. I took all of my knowledge from decades of searching and researching. I created a system with simple steps, incorporating everything I had learned.
The thing about Cindy is she's been there. She's a walking billboard of success. She had to think differently about her health to achieve the results she needed, and she invites others to be open to new solutions as well.
Let's face it, as a society, when it comes to your health and well-being, we're facing some serious challenges and obstacles.
Some food people are putting into their bodies is causing more harm than good.
I just wasn't the woman, the wife, the mom, the friend that I aspired to be.
Our current lifestyle leads us to overeat over-processed foods. And there are some problems you can't control based on toxins and depleted minerals in our bankrupt foods. These issues cause our body to store fat to protect itself from these impurities. Once the body is out of starvation mode and it's being fed by proper nutrients and proprietary minerals, it releases the fat and drops the weight while maintaining muscle, energy, and lasting results. I found out something that was very alarming, that in today's foods, they don't have the minerals and nutrients our body needs. Even the foods we think are healthy don't have all the nutrients our body needs. For example, UCLA did a study. In 1953, you only needed 1 bowl of spinach to get your daily intake of iron. Today, you need 43 bowls to receive the same nutrition. This is because of over-farming, depleted and bankrupt soils, and pesticides and herbicides sprayed all over the crops. Studies show that even organic foods don't have more nutrition, just 25% less toxins and pesticides. Let's talk a little bit more about environmental toxins. Our body protects itself from environmental toxins from the food we eat, the air we breathe, and the water we drink by creating a bubble of fat around the toxin to protect itself from damaging its vital organs. Imagine your body starving from not enough nutrition, battling toxins, holding on to fat. Now imagine your body fed at the cellular level. Once it's nourished, your cravings leave, along with the fat and toxins. With all that being said, we have a solution. The solution starts at the cellular level. We have to restore at the core. One thing we know for sure is that the body has to detoxify itself in order to get rid of the toxins. Then it needs to flood itself with nutrition at the core level, right down to the telomeres, the tips or caps of the chromosome, which protects your DNA. Scientists have discovered how long we live, how susceptible we are to diseases, and even our ability to lose weight is affected by the length of our telomeres. Let's zoom in on the telomere that starts to deteriorate with aging of the cell from toxins, disease, and even obesity. When the cell divides, telomeres shorten, and bad things happen when telomeres get short. When the cell divides, the genetic material in the cell needs to be copied. This is called DNA replication. But since our DNA can't replicate all the way to the ends of the chromosome, it causes DNA damage. The telomeres shorten, and the cell eventually dies. It's like a computer that loses information and starts to glitch and then crashes. That's what happens in our cells. They get damaged, and the DNA, our information in the cell, is destroyed and can't duplicate, and we eventually die. Short telomeres, short life. Long telomeres, long life and quality of living. Recently, Dr. Bill Andrews, a molecular biologist and leading researcher for healing the body through the cellular level, discovered an enzyme telomerase that re-lengthens and even extends the length of telomeres. Bill collaborated with John Anderson to create supplements, which is part of our nutraceutical line. This discovery, along with the discoveries of other scientists, won a Nobel Prize in health science.
This proven lifestyle system Cindy created was based on this research and her knowledge gained from 25 years of trial and experiences and it successfully resulted in her releasing almost 50 pounds.
The lifestyle system is always improving. It has a menu of options: nutritional system, mindset techniques, and community support. And recently, we've added Dr. Brooks Barr, MD, who was a professor at Stanford Medical School. Dr. Barr monitors our program, and in addition, can do CoolSculpting, Botox, and other cosmetic enhancements.
CoolSculpting helps people get rid of stubborn fat they can't get rid of through diet and exercise. It's a non-invasive procedure with little to no downtime, few side effects, quick recovery, and great results. It gives results similar to liposuction, but is more economical and safer. We can target fat pads almost anywhere on your body to sculpt your body and give you the results you want. People get the best results through CoolSculpting when they use it as part of a program that helps them make good choices and establish long-term patterns of behavior that allows them to achieve sustainable results through proper diet, nutrition, exercise, and sleep patterns.
Within the lifestyle system, each option can work independently from one another, but together it works synergistically, creating a compounded effect. The whole system is affordable, simple, flexible, comfortable, and tastes delicious. It also includes regular food. But don't listen to us, listen to the science.
Dr. Paul Arciero, PhD, said, "I've been a nutrition exercise scientist for 30 years, and my initial independent study using the nutritionals showed that participants, now these were men and women across the age spectrum that followed the program, had amazing results. And this is all scientifically documented. It's all third-party, independently studied, peer-reviewed science journals. Number one, they had over 24 pounds of weight loss over the first 11 weeks. They also lost massive amounts of body fat overall, 20%. Their increase in proportion of lean, healthy muscle mass went up 9%. When you're talking weight loss, that's usually unheard of, that somebody could actually increase their proportion of lean, healthy skeletal muscle mass. And then they had a 25% decrease in their oxidative stress level. That's what's going on inside the cells that's very damaging to our body."
Cindy is the expert health and wellness guide if you're looking for results with your lifestyle health goals. What drove her most to transform her health was her desire to help others. Her passion-based success for herself and our system has helped over 700 people lose over 100 pounds.
When you give your body what it needs, it can heal itself. You can enjoy life. You can be in a good mood.
I suffered with Epstein-Barr virus for over 35 years, and Cindy's program helped me get my life back.
I have much more pride for myself.
Dr. Barr recommends her system and partnering up with her for his medical procedures because he wanted a lifestyle for his clients that included the gamut of health, nutrition, mindset tools, and more long-lasting results for their future.
When I met Cindy and I learned about her system, I felt that I could partner with her and offer my patients who want to sculpt their body and get sustainable results a lifestyle change, something that they can use for years and decades to impact their health, their wellness, and their energy level into the future.
Imagine popping out of bed in the morning, feeling rested and ready for the day. Imagine being in control of your weight forever. Imagine feeling confident, vibrant, focused, and creative. Imagine the people in your life that want to feel better and have a simpler lifestyle solution. Whatever your goals are, weight loss, improving your body's composition, telomere support, building lean muscle, better sleep, more energy, better memory, a stronger mindset, and a belief and confidence in your ability to achieve your dreams. We don't just promise results, we guarantee them. We invite you to open your mind to new ideas and to think differently. Let us share in your health and wellness journey. Contact us at myweightloss4life.com and begin your personal lifestyle transformation today.
All right, Cindy, thank you so much for taking your time to join us, and hopefully we've been able to open eyes and kind of give you some additional perspectives as you study the Doctrine and Covenants this year. If you've been enjoying what we're talking about, we invite you to give us a big thumbs up, okay, and support us through subscribing to our channel and so forth. There, let your friends and neighbors know about your people in your ward about these podcasts. And I hope that, brothers and sisters, that this has been a blessing for you as you have been studying the Doctrine and Covenants this year. Cindy, thank you so much for your expertise and your help. I wish you the best and long life and live long and prosper, right?
To you as well.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.